Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Folks, the news is breaking so fast. Well, the news in the alt media space. The news in the mainstream media they're still thinking that the Russians are involved. I don't know. What are you going to do about the mainstream media? But in the alt media world, oh my gosh, Thomas, things are breaking so fast. We don't have time to even post and write these headlines that I presented this morning on Truth News Headlines. So I want to talk about Michael Horowitz and what we're finding out about him over there at the Office of Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And then I want to talk about another swamp creature bureaucrat, Andrew McCabe, because I know we have really got some stuff on him. And then I want to look at that amazing letter that Donald Trump's attorney sent out on Sunday night before these deep swamp bureaucrats were even at work. Oh, it's just so much, Thomas. All right, there's your intro.
Wow, I can grab any of that fruit and go? Okay.
Yeah, so much.
Well, let me just say first off, Michael Horowitz is not a white hat. He's as evil as the rest of the people that he works with. All the top dogs at the FBI and the DOJ are as corrupt as anyone can imagine, and more. We see that now with an article, True Pundit, isn't it,
Yes.
Betsy?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful article showing some of McCabe's crimes. McCabe is completely a criminal. He's basically a Russian spy in the FBI. He was the one who covered up for the Russian oligarchs with 10am, the Uranium One scandal here. He's the one who made sure that for years the Russian spies came in. There were, over a dozen Russian spies all picked up when they finally convicted the head of 10am, the Russian oligarch here running the Uranium One scam. They picked up a dozen spies at the same time. So they were watching these spies. Who do you think was in charge of all of that? That would have been Andrew McCabe, William Presap, and Larry Struck. They are the Russian specialists in the FBI who were keeping track of the 10-year-long Russian mafia. I call them oligarchs, but technically they're a uranium mafia, a Russian uranium mafia who has set out to take over all the uranium in America, which they have effectively done. So McCabe was the person covering for that. And anytime now it's come out that everyone who worked with McCabe is stepping up and whistleblowers are stepping forward and saying McCabe was sticking his nose in all the Russian deals, making sure that his Russian friends, particularly the very Russian friends that were used to charge Paul Manafort in the case that Mueller has brought against Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, it's the same exact person that happens to be McCabe's best buddy. They are so close that anytime anyone ever questioned this certain particular Russian oligarchs, McCabe would insist on being there, when in fact that was against all FBI protocol. So McCabe is dirty, his wife is dirty. Jill McCabe got money from Terry McAuliffe, who sits on the Clinton Foundation. Imagine that a man who sits on the Clinton Foundation gave money to a woman to run for a Senate office in his state. He gave state money to Jill McCabe. Terry McAuliffe gave $700. It's actually quite incorrect. The numbers have been thrown around. We know what the numbers are, but let's remember there are two sources for Jill McCabe's running. That was Hillary's super PAC as well as Terry McAuliffe using Virginia state money to give to his buddy so that she could run as senator in Virginia. Of course, she lost, but at the same time, isn't that amazing?
Well, some people say that maybe she conveniently lost because those campaign funds then she gets to keep.
Well, she puts them in her, yes, that is correct. That's absolutely the way that works. As long as she runs for another office and she doesn't close down the fact that she's running as a politician, she gets to keep that money. But then Andrew McCabe was put in charge of looking at Hillary Clinton's email security breaches, what I would call the largest espionage case in American history. And he is, along with Peter Strzok, who we now have been talking about quite a bit, but these few people make these decisions for Comey so that Comey can act as if he's not part of the counterintelligence investigation that was being conducted by his underlings. Well, of course, he's the head of the FBI. which means he's also the head of the counterintelligence section of the FBI. So he is culpable whether he wants to be or not. So Comey is really, anytime you say any of these people who worked underneath him, you are saying Comey. When you say, I've said this 1,000 times, when you say Comey, you say Andrew McCabe. He shared everything with him, and this small group that were his council. I forget what he called them, his advisory group. I think he called them advisory council, who are people who didn't even have the security clearances to hear the privileged information that he came out of conversations with the president with, let alone the counterintelligence attacks by McCabe through the counterintelligence department of the FBI. And we, as you keep pointing out, Betsy, William Priestap has yet to be fingered, but he's actually the person in charge of all this. When you say Russian dossier, you say William Priestap. Have you heard his name yet?
No. It's been out of the news. But you see, we don't necessarily really know what the organizational structure of this beast is. I mean, on the outside, it looks like the FBI does one thing and it investigates. But what if it is actually turned into a counterintelligence agency and it's something very different from their point of view? I know that sounds crazy, but...
That's not crazy at all. That's what's happened. That's the coup. That's the corporate intelligence.
They've turned us inside out.
This is a coup. Now, let me just point this out for, I guess, every news person in America who doesn't have the intelligence to figure this out. When they opened the counterintelligence investigation against Trump because they got the dossier, which under testimony John Brennan stated and Comey stated, and they've all said pieces of the puzzle. You just have to be able to plug in the truth because they always say the opposite of the truth, just like Bill Clinton when they asked him if he had sexual relations with that woman. They can talk all day long and lie. That's what they do. They're lawyers. They open their mouth, they lie. That's what these people are. There's only a small group of them. We're literally talking about a few dozen people. But if you took these few dozen people out of Washington, D.C., the entire deep state would collapse.
Oh, well, that sounds like I want to know what those names are so I can get a big van and come get them myself.
Almost all of them have come to the surface in our recent communiques. So we can name them. They're the top dogs, and Mueller and the top dogs at the Justice Department, at the FBI, at the CIA, especially those who have worked in the corporate world.
Well, we're also seeing that Patrick F. Kennedy is one of these insiders. He's over on the State Department side. We're going to be uncovering more about his biography. But, sorry.
And Duval Patrick?
Yes.
All you have
James
to do,
P. Chandler. I mean,
yes.
They've got this whole network that average Americans have never heard these names before. Well, that's a reason for it, because if you don't know who your enemy is, how can you kill them? Well, in a metaphorical way.
These are lawyer warlords.
Lawyer warriors.
Warlords. So they are warlords. These are legal warlords. They control patents that control trillions of dollars. They control political decisions that control geopolitical war.
Or if you're someone like Michael Horowitz, you go around the world teaching people, corporations, politicians how to get out of these predicaments and how to avoid prison time and how to avoid fines. I mean, this is crazy.
So, Robert Mueller is a continuation of the FBI counterintelligence investigation on Trump that was started in July of 2016, which is still going on. That is the special counsel, what he has done. And that is the reason he opened the umbrella up to also include New York, and so that he could bring in Andrew Weissman. Remember, Andrew Weissman is the worst legal terrorist out there. He is the one who, I'm sure, as I said before, the reason that they stormed Manafort's house in the middle of the night was to get the privileged information that they didn't have between Paul Manafort and his Wilmer Hale lawyers. We know this because Robert Mueller and 6 of his special investigative staff all come from Wilmer Hale. They couldn't get the information that was privileged when Paul Manafort asked his crooked lawyers from Wilmer Hale, how do I make sure that I hide this stuff as I'm moving money from these different accounts and my offshore accounts into my real estate? So that's what they wanted. And then they looked at it, they seized it, looked at it, and then apologized and gave it back to him and said, oops, we accidentally swept this up in coming and stealing everything from your house and waking up your wife in the middle of the night and pointing guns at you and so on and so forth. That is Andrew Weissman. Andrew Weissman then helped Robert Mueller go after the president-elect. Now, some people don't know this, and this is fresh in the news. The president-elect's team is actually a corporation, and they work with the GSA, the Government Services Agency, to handle equipment and money and basically their budget, but they are a corporation. They are a separate entity.
It's not a governmental entity. This is very important because I know what you're going to be describing. It's very important for people to understand that foundation.
Yes, and it's a bit shocking, but you hear this all the time. That's why they call him president-elect. Because he's elected by the vote, supposedly, especially if the other side concedes. And then the Electoral College has to vote. And we didn't think Trump would get through that. It was Paul Manafort that got him through that. And that's the reason they're so mad at Paul Manafort. And they're giving up one of their own D.C. Oppositional research propagandists par excellence. I mean, Paul Manafort is one of the great geniuses of our time. So why they won't take him down, in my opinion, my personal opinion, because they charged him with conspiracy. What are they going to do? Are they going to get these oligarchs that are mentioned in the dossier to come over here to testify? Well, now we see the 3 Russian oligarchs are, in fact, bringing a lawsuit. The 3rd lawsuit brought against Orbis, which is owned by Christopher Steele, the man who created the fake dossier, and it's in Washington, D.C. It's going to be under Judge Leon. So Judge Leon
you have to
much going on.
No, it's just the craziest thing. You have Judge Leon that's going to listen to this case. Now, folks, if you can't remember, Judge Leon is John Podesta's good buddy. And they even teach at Georgetown or something law, and they've known each other for a zillion years. Okay, so Podesta's good buddy is the judge. And the plaintiffs are the 3 Russian oligarchs. Like, I'm saying this is mafia.
And Alexei Gubarov,
Yes.
who also is suing Christopher Steele, both here and in Britain. And
Right, but it's all going to this one judge.
yes.
This Podesta's friend.
And he is also looking at the demand of the Congress to know and to have released the Fusion GPS, the oppositional research group that created the Trump dossier. They demand to see their banking records. And as I have said all along, mark my words, and I don't know if anyone else agrees with me on this, but I will stick my neck out on this 100%. When we see the list of who paid Fusion and who GPS Fusion paid, you will see the biggest list of criminals in the swamp in one spot that you have ever seen. And so who have we now found out? Judge Leon allowed some of the people they paid to actually be released to the public. Now, every time they release something that's part of a case that's still going on that is released to the public, that is completely illegal. That's a leak, and that is propaganda being used for politicization, and therefore the case should be closed down. But that doesn't seem to happen right now. But that's okay, because it works out for Trump's favor and all of our favors. This is the floodlights coming on, and the creatures of the swamp, the snakes and these disgusting alligators and all kinds of other creatures that haven't been seen since prehistoric time are crawling out of the swamp right now, okay? And that's what we're seeing, is the ugliness of it. Robert Mueller's ugliness that he had to bring in at the end because he had nothing. And I go back, listen to our tapes. We've said this before. He brought in Andrew Weissman and the New York State Attorney, Sneederman, and the New York Manhattan, Eastern, and Southern districts so that they could bring in the prior records and Manafort, or else they would have had nothing to charge anybody with, except entrapment when they tricked George Papadopoulos and they tricked General Flynn. That's all that is. And with Gates and with Manafort, that's all they have. So what happened? That was Andrew Weissman going into Manafort's house and getting the privileged information between the lawyers. He got what he wanted and then said, oops, we'll give it back. So he went in and he went to the corporation of the president-elect, the transition team. As you know, he actually elects someone to be the president of that corporation during the transition team. And they work with the inaugural group. And then only after he takes that vow is the president the president. Until then, he's still a private citizen and you cannot surveil him. You cannot steal his records that are put and sealed in a corporation.
It's in a corporation. It's not with the government.
And especially without a warrant, and especially since Mueller, and I'm sure it was Weissman, who went there to begin with and told the lawyers of that corporation, the Trump transition team, they wanted those records, and the lawyer said, "No. You're gonna have to give us a warrant.
Yeah.
This has never been done in history. What are you talking about? This is politicalization. This is nonsense." So what did they do? Suddenly,
I mean, when I read this,
the man in charge
oh, you're kidding!
goes into the hospital. Nobody says why, and dies. And while he's in the hospital and dies, they go in and seize the records.
Did he die?
He died.
Oh my goodness, I didn't see that part. I heard he was.
He's
I
dead.
saw that he was hospitalized. And I went, "You're kidding!" They expect us to think that this, in the day of all these Clinton things, that this happened just at the time that Mueller needed the records, and the guy wouldn't give it to him.
The breach of the DNC was followed by the mysterious death of Seth Rich. The people who served the man who served Debbie Wasserman in her case ended up dead within a very short time afterwards. Another lawyer concerned with Debbie Wasserman ended up killed and floating in the ocean. There are people who are dying. We are not playing a game here. When we say there's a war, we're talking about whistleblowers coming forth and putting their lives on the line. That's what we're talking about, and people die. So what we're seeing now is Andrew Weissman was sent in, just like it was with Manafort, into a crippled corporation, magically, mysteriously crippled corporation, and they seized the records. Now, when they seized them, they said that the next person in charge just said, "Yeah, you can have them."
Yes, well, of course, because what would you do? This was the authorities coming in.
Just like the FBI always does. When
were
they
being
go in,
strong-armed.
the second person in charge, they knew every single violation of the law he had ever made. And they went in and they leveraged the situation. And it doesn't matter because they got what they wanted and no one was told. The Trump transition team, the corporation, was never informed. This has just recently come out. And so what happens now doesn't matter.
This will be, no,
They'll give them back like they did with Manafort's stolen records. They'll
No,
just give them back and
because-
say, "Oops!"
Well, but the people are awake now. We are so awake. And you know what?
They already used it in the cases, Betsy, they used it. They've already interviewed everyone from the
Yes,
White
they
House.
did.
They tried with entrapment to get all of them because they had their records and their text messages, and those people didn't know they had their text messages. Because the corporation would have told Trump had they been subpoenaed or a warrant had been given, and then he would have told his people, plead the fifth. Look what they did to George Papadopoulos.
But their guy
Look what they did
was
to Flynn.
dead. So they closed that loop.
Yes.
Folks, let me say, this would be no different than Mueller and his group coming into your company. You're a businessman, you own a company, and just coming in and maybe going to the place where your emails are stored and just taking them. Just taking them. This is outrageous.
It's not the first time that things around Clinton have come up missing as records. People have gone to jail over the missing records she sent people in to get. Her records you don't get. Obama's records in the library, Obama's records are sealed and his library is nowhere to be found because he hasn't found a place to put it. So therefore, in perpetuity, we may not have an Obama library. We may not be able to access his records. That's the way they work. And they work that way because of the lawlessness of the White House right back to the time of George H.W. Bush, when the CIA took over the White House. And that's what we have purported. And we can demonstrate that and prove it right up to the time that Trump came to power. So what we see is they will give those records back. No problem. But they already used them to trick people up in their testimony illegally. Now, Flynn can get the case dropped because Larry Stroke was moved and he was discredited as a witness. He was the person who interviewed Flynn. Flynn doesn't have to have any charges. That's why they will not charge Flynn with a thing because they know his lawyers tell him the same thing I'm telling you right now.
And also the entrapment.
Yes, it's total entrapment.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
George Papadopoulos.
Are they going to pay back the money that he had to spend, that he had to defend himself with his attorney fees?
He had
Somebody
to put
needs to make it right with this man.
He's going to lose his house over this.
Well,
he will lose his reputation. He will lose his career. Now, George Papadopoulos, the other low-hanging fruit that Mueller came in and got, what happens there? Nothing. They won't charge him with anything either. They don't have anything, and they tried everything. But what was supposed to happen? Let's go back. Take a few steps back. Mueller came in to do what? Cover Comey's tracks, make sure Comey didn't go to jail, cover up Comey's Russian collusion and Comey's many attempts to work against Trump during the election, during the time he was president-elect, and after he was elected. In other words, we're talking about insurrection. We are talking about attempting a regime change. We are talking about using a fake dossier, and it doesn't matter whether they got a FISA warrant. They have been in complete noncompliance with FISA warrants. Forget your stupid FISA warrants, people, and people who keep plugging in the dates of those FISA warrants. Forget that. They've been monitoring these people whenever they want, anytime they want. What don't you understand? Read our new article that's coming out to show you how pervasive it is. I don't have time to list all the programs that monitor everything everyone does. That would have included Trump and his entire team. But that isn't what matters. Susan Rice unmasking people in the White House skiff. They had a whole office that was doing that against everyone in Trump's campaign. This is all well known. Andrew McCabe's collusion, his obstruction of justice, the fact that he looks like a Russian spy, and all they've done is they said, we want you to step back for a moment while the 3 investigations of you being a leak, of you being a Russian spy, and of you working politically with your wife and taking money from the Clintons, hiding it through taking money through Terry McAuliffe, head of the Clinton Foundation, saying it came from Virginia. These are all crimes, folks. This isn't just breaking regulations. That's why all these people are fighting tooth and fang for their lives. And Robert Mueller is fighting tooth and fang. We told him to get out by Thanksgiving, or else he would be fried alive.
And you haven't mentioned him.
And if you expect, or anyone out there expects, Michael Horowitz to come get Mueller and Andrew Weissman for stealing corporate records illegally and using them in this biased, totally compromised investigation, you are just pinch yourself and wake up, because you are just imagining things. He is the worst of all. That's the reason he's tried no cases, so nobody can actually say, hey, this is who you are. You can't even put, besides the recent research that came through our friends and us, you wouldn't even know who he was. So, yes, people in the White House, yes, I should name and call people out who should be listening to this, because I know you listen to it. You need to go after the right people. The only way to do that is to replace Jeff Sessions with someone as vicious as a Chris Christie who wants to be president. The only reason anyone puts their political career online and gives up of their donor stream is because they want to be the president, so they can do a Hillary Clinton and do a White House CIA rogue let's become a billionaire routine through having a fake presidential library, which becomes a foundation, which becomes so many foundations, you can't name all the Clinton foundations. Mark my words. I have just found out of some of them that are the most ridiculous ones that they have created. The Justra Clinton Sustainability Growth Initiative, look into that one. You won't believe $200 million was given for the uranium deal for Bill going over setting it up. This is well known. These are in historical records in newspapers, in their own statements, in their own bragging, in legal records, in the way they purchased their companies and sold them to Putin himself. Putin now controls our uranium, and after he gets his Centrus Energy deal, he will control our plutonium in this country too. So why are we at war with them? Why do we have missiles pointed at them when they control our uranium?
Because it's not reality, people.
Thank you.
It's not. We're becoming the geopolitical Sherpas to take people to the higher truth so that they can see what's going on. It's just awful. And then you've got Judge Leon. Get back there, because you want to see some good reality TV. Watch and see what he does. We call that, it's going to be the Clinton cartel versus the Russian mafia. And if Judge Leon doesn't get out of the way, he's going to be called roadkill.
We like Leon. I like the image you put on Truth News headlines with the roadkill, because he doesn't know what to do. Who's he going to turn to? They're all implied. Who goes down? Yes. There isn't a scapegoat. He doesn't get a nod and a wink that says, oh, let Manafort go down for tax evasion. He'll get out of it because he's got sharp lawyers. No, Judge Leon is out there hanging. Is he going to listen to John Podesta? If he even has a meeting with during his confirmation hearing, Judge Leon said he wouldn't take the job as an attorney in a federal court in Washington, D.C., if he had to give up teaching with his bunk buddy, good old John Podesta.
Imagine the secrets those two
20
have.
years. And what do they teach? How does They teach courses on how the executive branch gets around being controlled by Congress. That's their course.
Well, that sounds like what Michael Horowitz does, but on an international stage.
And when you get the judges involved in these things, that is where it really gets politically thick. Because what had to happen to take? I love this, to take the light, the spotlight,
Take
off
it
of
home, Thomas.
John Podesta. Right?
Yeah.
Wasn't John and Hillary going down because when they gave the money illegally through Elias, their lawyer, what's his name, through Perkins Coie?
Yeah.
Mark Elias?
Yeah, that's it.
When they lied before Congress, he said he didn't know anything about the dossier, and his lawyer was sitting next to him, and the lawyer then lied, and the lawyer then was asked by everybody, he said he didn't know anything about it, and 2 days later he says, I know everything about it, I paid them. Oh, but Hillary and John don't know anything about it, though. One of the payments came from Hillary's super PAC, the same PAC that, as I've said from day one, paid for the dossier that doesn't take a genius to figure out, and that the DNC paid their part through John Podesta. Because they paid Christopher Steele, and because good old Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr, who's been demoted from the Department of Justice Assistant Attorney General into a lower office. No punishment. He should go to jail for treason. His wife is an espionage Russian spy because she colluded with Christopher Steele and the Russians who created the Russian Trump fake dossier.
And that's why these Russian oligarchs are all upset, because they were named in the dossier, so they're suing. And you always say, Thomas, that we'll be able to make movement in this when the attorneys get involved and lawsuits are filed.
That's where you always see it. And Christopher Steele is fighting for his life because he's going to be sued for so much money, because those oligarchs, if he wins, they'll kill him.
Yeah.
That's the way Russian oligarchs work.
Right,
you don't mess with a Russian oligarch.
Listen.
Look what happened to the one in Russia. It took him 10 years to convict him with Rod Rosenstein, Robert Mueller, and James Comey covering for that man for 10 years as he brought in over a dozen female Russian spies who said they were one step away from being in Hillary's server.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Don't you think Judge Leon is going, ooh, and the other side, the plaintiffs are 3 Russian oligarchs.
That's nothing.
I know, but
when we see who was paid by Fusion GPS, why do you think Tony Podesta ended his company and got out? Because everybody kept saying, John, you're still connected to the company. He never divested himself of that company, ever. That is a lie. He never divested himself of Juul Energy. That is a lie. He did get $35 million for Juul Energy from Russians. That's a fact. He's a friend of many Russian oligarchs. That's a fact. You got to be kidding. These people think they can blame it on Trump or Jared or Ivanka or whoever they can point at in the Trump team, whether they were there for a minute or not. Remember, when he was told about Flynn, he fired him 2 days later. When he was told about Manafort, he fired him 2 days later. Why didn't the FBI tell him before? That's a crime. That's a crime. That is called entrapment in a presidential election with the known Republican candidate. They take a vow of being absolutely unbiased to work in the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA. None of these people were unbiased, and they are fighting for their lives right now. So Rod Rosenstein, who was supposed to be, he was the heir apparent, just like Andrew McCabe was the heir apparent. They had been practicing since 1990 on how to lie to Congress, how to dissemble, how to use legal languages to simply deflect, to dodge, to not answer, to be a Bill Clinton, to be, they were probably all trained by the same lawyer. That would be James Chandler. You can bet that James Chandler taught Michael Horowitz. He taught Robert Mueller. We know that because in 1993, they were all working together with IBM. So you have
IBM, then also mentioned the Eclipse Foundation.
And then they created the Eclipse Foundation, which created created social networking with fake silicon, what do they call boy kings?
Yeah, we call them the cutout boy kings.
They're just fakes. Ask them a question about
really,
what they supposedly invented, and
right,
they can't even give you an answer. Wake up. Just pay attention. And when you're paying attention, you're going to see that the crimes now are coming after all of them. Trump doesn't have to turn and fire Mueller. Mueller's firing himself.
I know.
Oh, by the way, here's what's really happening.
Okay, go.
Okay.
Tell me.
When Mueller couldn't get anything from the Trump's the president-elect's transition team, when they couldn't use any of that against any of the White House people or against anybody, they had to change their plan. So they had began from the beginning having the same plan as James Comey, who perjured himself repeatedly so he could plea down from treason to perjury.
Oh, that sounds like Michael Horowitz coaching him again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And so that it's all about the plea bargaining. It's all about the sentence, folks. It isn't about the crime. So Robert Mueller started leaking from the day he started the special counsel. He was already colluding with James Comey beforehand because Comey said that he knew that Robert Mueller would take over the special counsel. That means they knew that they were going to frame and entrap good old Jeff Sessions, who's just not quick enough to keep up with their evil. They knew that Rod Rosenstein would be the person that would then take over for Sessions. And they knew that this was all talked about ahead of time. I said this the second that that Robert Mueller was appointed. I told you all of this, folks. That Rod Rosenstein and Mueller and Comey all got together and they discussed this. They even discussed what's going to be the outcome. I pointed out in day one that it would be Manafort and some other low-hanging fruit. I pointed out how they would get Manafort, on and on and on. It doesn't take much to figure out evil. Evil is not inventive. It is clever, but it follows the same old patterns. And so if you've been on the inside and you know those patterns, then you can follow it very, very simply. Most people are not evil enough to follow the pathways of evil because the lies are so fantastic. And as they know, the bigger the lie, the easier it is to get people to believe them. The lie of Robert Mueller investigating Trump is that they're not investigating Hillary or any of her cronies who have so many Russian connections. We don't even want to get me started on that because Hillary is as corrupt as can be. And so if you have McCabe being pushed back, that's a good step. But then you're going to have Strzok imprisoned. And you're going to have Lisa, did I get her name right? Lisa Page imprisoned. What they did, those are crimes. And then you have to have Rod Rosenstein.
Well, wait a minute. Being demoted to the HR department does not count as punishment for treason.
Correct. Okay. Bruce Orr must go to prison.
Yes.
Nellie Orr must go to prison until we investigate them because they are all flight risks, because they all are international. They're all counterintelligence. They could disappear tomorrow. They're experts at that. Those 4 people need to be put in jail. Let Robert Mueller go on. But let Michael Horowitz put Andrew Weissman, the person who was the lead lawyer on both the attack on Manafort, which he already had that information. He went after illegal information, and the attack on President-elect Trump's transition team. Those are attacks, and Andrew Weissman needs to go to jail for that. Then let Bob Muleface go on with his investigation, because the longer he goes on, the more we catch. And let Congress huff and puff, name a time a congressional hearing ever did anything.
They don't do diddly.
Name a time an inspector general ever did anything. They work inside of the group that hires them. So do you think it's an oxymoron to say the inspector general is going to do anything? He is just simply going to be the catch-all, and they're going to go, just like with the IG, with the FISA court said Comey was in 100% noncompliance. He was surveilling everyone, and the CIA and NSA were in complete noncompliance. They were getting hundreds of millions of people in upstream catches. And what happened? Nothing. It's going to bleed to the December 31st, and the 702 renewal for the FISA court may drift on into April. They're going to continue to do this, folks. When are we going to put James Clapper in jail for the fact that he admitted that he surveils all of us? When are we going to dismantle these systems that do these things?
What about Brennan?
John Brennan is a criminal. He became a Muslim. He actually did Muslim prayers in his office at the end. He became completely radicalized in the end. Talk to anyone who worked with him. When he was in Riyadh and the bombing was there, it was very suspicious that he was there. And when he came back and his climb up the ladder to become the head of the CIA, where he literally stood against his boss, Donald Trump, and made horrible statements which show that he violated law after law, just like Comey, just like Clapper, just like Brennan, just like Rogers. They all broke the law. They were privileged conversations they had with Donald that they leaked. This is a fact. Everybody knows it. Comey admits it. He's proud of it. That's what got the special counsel going.
Hillary was going to win, and then they would all be free.
Precisely.
Oh,
Betsy,
they didn't.
They were so 100% convinced that none of them could have conceived this. The lawlessness had gotten to the point that every one of them, like, let's take an Andrew McCabe. Why would anybody be so insane to do the things they know he's done? Because he thought that he would never get caught.
Right.
And he saw everybody else doing it.
Yeah.
Comey wants to be president. Remember, when he thought that Mueller was winning in the special investigation, which again, I'm the only one saying this, but I assure you he was given immunity. Otherwise, he could not have come and testified before Congress without Mueller being charged with collusion and conflict of interest, and obstruction of justice and many, many other crimes. So we know Comey thought he was going to get off scot-free. He actually insinuated in his text when he was under a pseudonym that, the presidency might be something he'd consider. When these people get that psychotic, Betsy, they are so psychotic and so they're asocial. They're not ill. They're asocial. They don't like people. It's only themselves that they like. It's so selfish. It's unbelievably selfish. When you see that that's their driving force, it's very easy to predict what's going to happen. Mueller is going to get out soon, and he's going to try to get out without him going down and without Comey going down. He's going to say, there's nothing happened here, folks, and I'm not even going to try these other people because the case has been tainted. But I want to say I was completed with my case. And I, just like Comey, he had completed his matter with Henry Hill investigation.
But the dog ate
it. Investigation. I'm completed with my investigation, though I didn't even question her. And this thing I'm reading you, which was written months ago, was adjusted by people who aren't even lawyers. And the people who investigated her were, in fact, seemingly connected with Russia much more than Trump is, or absolutely hated Trump. So I'm going to go ahead and, as Comey, exonerate her, though I'm not in the Department of Justice. That's the reason Loretta Lynch got out, because she knew she was going to be questioned if she stayed one day longer. These are crimes against the state. These are unbelievably selfish crimes that only happened in a completely lawless condition.
Okay, I only have one more thing to ask you. It's a little bit of a setup question. You don't know I'm going to ask you this, but I know it's going to kind of just set you off. I'll let you run for a while, but I do want you to wrap it up with this question, all right? Okay.
Do I have to agree to that?
No. Okay. I want you to explain to us how this is not the way things work in classifying and unclassifying information. I want you to explain what Patrick F. Kennedy was doing over at the State Department, taking Hillary's emails and changing the classifications on it.
We got people working on who that guy is, but I can tell you one thing. Nobody can give a blanket declassification for documents that were hand-carried out of a place that it is illegal to hand-carry them out of. That in itself, Patrick Kennedy is a liar. I don't even have to look at the case. Nobody can do that. And Hillary says she has the right. Well, there was a new law that was created by Barack Obama executive order that allowed her to classify and declassify things at will. I didn't think that existed. I had to go back and find that because people pointed that out to me, and I said it didn't exist, and I was incorrect. It does exist. Certain people, the very top people in certain agencies can classify and declassify. And there's many reasons for that, because it takes so long to classify or declassify something. So it was just a quick way to get around things. But no, what she did was completely wrong. Nobody can get her out of that. She had a server. She knew what she was doing. She had staff on the Clinton presidential group that did the same exact crimes, that went to jail for it. She knew what she was doing. She had people who went to jail in front of her eyes for doing what she did on purpose, both at the DNC and in her private server. So Patrick Kennedy, I don't care who it is, ain't getting her out of that.